Hey all, it's been a minute. I was thinking about some potential new video ideas and it dawned on me. Why not make a Voruna guide to capitalize on her Prime release? I mean, I'm practically known for my Warframe content more so than my other videos. And Voruna has always been my favorite Warframe in the game, even when Lewis Prey launched, and it was really hard to defend her on launch. Also, before I continue, a lot of this was written before her Prime release because I wasn't expecting any significant changes to her abilities, but I will add in extra stuff if they do change things. And I understand that a lot of this is going to be rambling, so I did add timestamps in the description if you just want to skip to the builds or whatever else. Now, let's jump into it. Voruna is the 51st Warframe and the 49th non-exclusive Prime Warframe. She's themed around werewolves and is partially inspired by the Medena of Lithuanian mythology, who is also the namesake of her deluxe skin. From a gameplay perspective, she's mainly a melee buffer and status spreader. Her signature weapons are the Paragale Sniper and Sorrowfang Heavyblade. Voruna's components can be acquired from Rotation C of Conjunction Survival on Lua's Uvarium and Circulus nodes. Rotation C on survival missions is every 20 minutes, so every 20 minutes you have a chance to get one of her components. Luckily, using the Lua Thrax Plasms earned from that mission, you can visit Archimedean Yonta in the Chrysalith on the Zeramin 10-0. She'll have a pity store where you can buy not only Voruna's components, but the rest of that mission's rewards too. As for her Prime, you can currently obtain her from opening her relics and Void Fissures. On screen here, I'll put up a picture of her relic tables. At the time of writing this, she's also available to purchase in Prime Access for a limited time, though it'll only be a few months until it rotates to the next Prime frame. Her accessories pack comes with the Hanteller Prime Syandana, Vilcus Prime Sumdali, the Okuri Tales Prime Ephemera, and a 90-day affinity and resource booster. Now to go over Voruna's abilities. I have a condensed version of this section available on my Shorts tab, but here I'll explain the in-depth mechanics of the abilities. Whatever exact numbers I'll be mentioning come from a Voruna that's unmodded but at max rank, so when you start putting mods on her, the numbers could increase or decrease based on her final stats. The Warframe wiki also likely has some information about Voruna that I don't cover here, such as the exact damage calculations. Her first ability is Shroud of Dinar. She'll turn invisible and her movement speed will be buffed for a few seconds. The invisibility expires when the ability's duration ends if she fires a ranged shot or if she does a melee attack. While invisible, her melee weapons will gain a 2 times flat critical damage bonus, 100% critical chance, and 100% status chance. When the invisibility is broken, the buffs will last for 3 seconds, but they can be extended up to 8 seconds after getting melee kills. Her augment for this ability is Prey of Dinar. When casting Shroud, a random enemy will be marked, and said enemy will have increased damage vulnerability. When casting her second ability, Fangs of Rox, on that enemy, its spread radius will be increased by up to 150%. Her second ability is Fangs of Rox. Casting while targeting an enemy will make Voruna lunge at them, deal some small slash damage, and then inflict 5 random status effects on them. This ability can inflict most physical and elemental status effects in the game except for Void, Tau, Knockdown, Staggered, Ragdoll, Lifted, and Microwave. She'll also gain some brief invulnerability when casting it. When killing an enemy affected by the ability, the status effects will be spread to surrounding enemies. Her third ability is Lycat's Hunt. This is also the ability you unlock when subsuming her into the Helminth. While it's active, melee kills will drop health orbs and headshot kills will drop energy orbs. Also, killing an enemy afflicted by at least 5 status effects will extend the ability's duration up to 60 seconds. The Helminth version functions the same, however the orb drop rate is reduced to 50%. Her fourth ability is Ulfrun's Descent. This ability will put Voruna on all fours and provide 5 charges. Targeting an enemy and consuming 1 charge will make Voruna lunge at an enemy and deal slash damage. Each successful kill from this ability will progressively increase its base damage, critical chance, and critical damage. The max bonuses are 900% damage, 42.5% critical chance, and 1.95 times critical damage. While active, base Voruna will walk around like normal, but Voruna Prime will run on all fours. Now, Lycat's Hunt does consider kills from Ulfrun's Descent as melee kills, but the game itself doesn't work like that. Ulfrun's Descent does not benefit from universal melee bonuses such as Archon Shards, Arcanes, or Steel Charge. And while Shroud of Dinar's buff period is active, the ability gets a flat 100% critical chance and will amplify the slash damage. Also, Ulfrun's Descent has an augment called Ulfrun's Endurance. This augment allows the ability to refresh some of its charges when directly killing an enemy, otherwise you only have 5 charges. Lastly, Voruna can cast her abilities while Ulfrun is active, but she can't cast Helminth abilities. Finally, Voruna has 4 passives she can choose from and can have 1 active at a time. Holding the ability cast buttons will activate your desired passive, but subsuming over an ability with the Helminth will remove that ability's passive. Shroud of Dinar's passive boosts Voruna's parkour velocity by 50%. Fangs of Rock's passive gives her complete resistance to new status effects. Lycat's Hunt's passive increases her heavy attack efficiency by 100%. And Ulfrun's Descent's passive gives her an extra life and, when consumed, puts it on a 60-second cooldown. Now, Voruna has multiple playstyles depending on how you approach her, whether as a nuking frame or as a weapons platform. If you have enough energy at the start of the mission and you still have the ability on your build, cast Lycat's Hunt as early as possible. It's the only way you're getting more energy for a while. You should also make sure Fangs of Rock's passive is up permanently, as it's without a doubt the best of her 4 passives, but more on that later. Also, if you cast Fangs of Rocks on an enemy 2 or 3 times, you'll have a good chance of inflicting every possible status effect you can, leading to a bunch of damage. And Shroud of Dinar will basically serve as a get out of jail free card alongside the buffs it'll provide, as its invisibility is another form of survivability that's very much needed on Voruna. Basically, keep repeating Fangs of Rocks on an enemy and kill that enemy with Ulfrun's Descent to spread the status effects further, and recast Shroud of Dinar whenever the invisibility ends. If you have to recast something like Roar more later, you'll have to exit Ulfrun's Descent, recast the ability, and then re-enter Ulfrun. As for Voruna's strengths and weaknesses, well, there's quite a few pros. For starters, she's a very agile frame. If you stack up enough parkour velocity on her, she can dart around the tile sets really quickly, and that makes her one of the strongest options in Void Cascade, especially when she can quickly get to an Exilizer that's like 400 meters away. She's also a really quick killer. I don't know if this is still true, but when the Prey of Dinar augment released, that single-handedly gave her the single highest KPM in the entire game. That, on top of the buffs she provides to melee weapons, makes her on par with Kullervo as one of the strongest melee buffing frames in the game. And Fangs of Rock's passive is one of the strongest sources of status effect resistance in the game. It's an incredibly solid form of survivability. But despite all of this, there are 2 glaring cons that keep her from being perfect. Her first weakness is her lack of survivability. On paper, she should have no trouble surviving. Fangs of Rock's passive, invisibility, consistently dropping health orbs, but for some reason she ends up dying really quickly, so you sometimes need a few extra external sources of survivability like Arcanes or Companions. But her second issue, and this is arguably bigger than her survival issues, is Ulfrun's Descent, like in general. The ability is in this weird place where it wants to be an exalted ability, but it's not. It's half considered a melee weapon, but also not. Like, it'd really benefit from Archon Shards, especially since Fangs of Rocks mogs the absolute hell out of Ulfrun's Descent. And the fact that Ulfrun's Endurance is not a base part of the ability and is an augment is absolutely criminal. It's such a clunky ability, but that's not even the worst of it. There's this weird glitch where using the ability somehow soft locks you for the rest of your mission. I don't know the specifics, I've never experienced it, but at least 2 of my friends have. I'm not sure if it's been fixed or not in any of the hotfixes that have come out in the past 2 years, but the fact that it exists is kind of crazy. I hope at some point it receives a major overhaul, especially since we're in a world without Whipclaw and Landslide stat sticks. Like, let it be directly moddable like Shattered Lash, let universal melee bonuses like Archon Shards apply to it. Anything to make it on par with even Fangs of Rocks, let alone other nuking abilities in the game. Because of this, when modding for endgame content, you're basically hard stuck making a melee weapons platform because Ulfrun is the easy ability to subsume over. Now, before I go into my other Voruna builds, this one needs its own section because it's so hyper-specific. I call this Voruna build Perfected. Maybe. This is a build that's made exclusively for Void Cascade, so it has a lot of specifics required for it to function. It also might not be very effective in other activities like your run-of-the-mill survival fisher. This build philosophy does not carry over to the regular Voruna builds. They are much more flexible. This one just needs to be specific because Void Cascade is a really difficult activity, and I've never actually gotten to level cap in Void Cascade, but that's because I generally suck at the activity, so whether or not this build is good depends on your skill during Void Cascade, and also if you have the free time to wait 3+ hours to hit level cap. There are some mods in Arcanes that you can swap off as you see fit, but there are certain ones that need to stay in order for it to function. To start, here's the build for Voruna herself. As you can see, we're capitalizing on shield gating as our main form of survivability, though Arcane Circumvent will let us steal the overguard from the Thrax Centurions that come out of the Exilizers. If you want to, you can swap off this Arcane for something else as it's only a 4-month-old Arcane, but Arcane Impetus needs to stay here, more on that later. We also have Ice Spring here because of its bonus parkour velocity, and parkour velocity is a really valuable stat to have in Void Cascade. Now, there are 3 different versions of this mod: Firewalker, Lightning Dash, and Toxic Flight. These 4 mods all provide the exact same amount of parkour velocity, the only difference is the elemental type infused into your weapon. If you want to run Toxic Flight over Ice Spring, sure, do that, but I really recommend having any one of these mods in your Exilis slot, then you'll have an easier time getting to the Exilizers before you fail the mission. But since this is the highest level activity in the game, if you don't care about the parkour velocity, you can run Prime Sure-footed. For her weapons, I really recommend having an Incarnate Miter with the following evolutions. The actual mod setup doesn't matter very much, but 2 mods that are needed are Amalgam Serration and Neutralizing Justice. Amalgam Serration because it buffs your sprint speed, and Neutralizing Justice because if you're doing a fissure, it'll be useful to take out corrupted crewman nullifiers. If only it dealt with those stupid crew Trokars. The secondary doesn't really matter, but it needs to have Amalgam Barrel Diffusion on it because it buffs your dodge speed. I personally go with the Epitaph Prime, but the Grimoire is another solid option, more on that weapon later. My go-to melee, however, is the Incarnate Nami Solo, and specifically because it has an evolution that provides health regen when getting finisher kills. Now, I'll admit, I'm not getting many finisher kills often, so if you're like me, you can also run the Incarnate Dual Ichor. That weapon has an evolution that provides health regen when killing an enemy with at least 3 toxin stacks. Companions are flexible in this build, but I'll outline Voruna's best companions in a later section. As far as Archon Shards go, my go-to setup with this specific build has been 1 Amber Shard with 50% parkour velocity, and then 4 Violet Shards with 37.5% melee critical damage. If you want to get that double critical damage bonus though, you might have to swap the parkour velocity shard with an Azure Shard that gives 75 max energy to reach that 501 energy threshold. Now to talk about the more flexible Voruna builds. A couple of things before I go into this. If you don't care about any of them, here is this timestamp for the first build. You do not have to follow these builds to a T. I'm not going to be one of those Warframe YouTubers that goes, follow my build exactly the way it is and you'll deal millions of damage per tick. If it doesn't work, then you're the problem and not me. I'm also not a Warframe YouTuber in general. If there's something you want to swap out to make your builds unique to you, that's perfectly okay. That's the beauty of Warframe. I will be posting screen caps of mod setups, but the sections following this will be me providing options more so than telling you this is how you need this specific setup to function. Also, I'm not going to take full credit for any of these builds. A lot of them, even the perfected one, were taken from other YouTubers. Also, this little tidbit is mainly for my friends and clan members, since they always seem worried when I bring out a build that capitalizes on these mods. But I'll say this, Archon mods are not always necessary. They provide the exact same amount of a given stat but have a small bonus attached to it. Archon Stretch and Flow do provide bonus energy regen, but it is negligible because Lycat's Hunt and Equilibrium will already be giving you energy. If you want to run Prime Flow over Archon Flow, go for it. If you want to run Stretch over Archon Stretch, go for it. So, I'll be the first to admit,
I made a mistake.
A mistake?
Yes.
I did a bit more research while playing with Voruna Prime, and I learned that Archon Continuity, Flow, and Intensify don't synergize well with Voruna. If you apply 10 stacks of Toxin with Fangs of Rock, Archon Continuity will only provide 1 corrosive stack. Flow requires the enemy to be killed by an ability that deals cold damage, not just be afflicted with cold status. And Archon Intensify requires the ability to innately heal you instead of just dropping health orbs. So in general, Archon Stretch and Vitality are the best Archon mods for Voruna. Lastly, my personal criteria for a build being viable falls into 3 different criterias. For brand new players, it needs to get to the new war on its own. For mid-game budget builds, it needs to be able to clear regular Star Chart 1999 content. For Steel Path builds, it needs to function well in Steel Path Circulus. Archimedia, super bosses like the Guilty, and Archon hunts place a lot of modifiers on your builds, so in those game modes you need to rely on more than the base standard. We'll start with a new player friendly build, and there is none. I mean, Voruna is an incredibly strong frame in the early game, so if you either farmed her prime early on or outright bought her, just slap whatever you want on her, throw 1 or 2 former on there, and it'll carry you up to the new war. Because I was curious, I did a run of Adaro on Sedna with an unmodded Voruna and weapons, and it survived longer than I was expecting. What I will say is though, strength and range are her most wanted stats, so put on mods that increase both of those stats and you're set. Efficiency is negligible since you'll be regaining energy pretty consistently. Most of my endgame Voruna builds have about 45% efficiency anyway. Some duration is nice because of Shroud of Dinar's melee bonuses, but that's not enough to warrant building completely for duration. Now past the new war and leading into 1999, you're gonna need a bit more firepower. By now you should at least have the essential prime mods and her augments. Following this logic, something like this would be a suitable option for mid-game content. Again, you don't have to follow this specifically if you don't want to, just remember strength and range are important on Voruna. And now to the meat and potatoes of this video, the Steel Path builds. Before we talk about the Helminth ones, I'll just show off what an ideal No-Helminth Steel Path setup looks like. At this point, you're going to be seeing her 2 augments very often since they're pretty much band-aid augments. Also at this point, I'd focus on modding for range more than strength. You can make up the extra strength with either Archon Shards or specific Arcanes. With Arcane Impetus and Molt Augmented alone, you'll be looking at a near permanent 138% ability strength bonus. Range is not such a generous stat, and for good reason. Now, before I show off examples of some Helminth builds I've used, I'll quickly outline which Helminth abilities I've used with Voruna the most, and which ones I don't see as very effective. I have not tried all of these, especially the ones I don't see as very useful, but some of these I have. Also, if you are going to use a Helminth subsume, Lycat's Hunt and Ulfrin's Descent are the best abilities to subsume over. Fangs of Rock is the best form of ability DPS, and Shroud of Dinar, on top of its melee bonuses, is a good form of survivability and mobility. Plus, those 2 passives are too hard to pass up. Now, Wrathful Advance, Roar, and Eclipse are her best Helminth options. These 3 buff either ability strength or melee weapon damage, and in Eclipse's case, you can choose to have bonus damage reduction, which is always nice, but not necessary. And when it comes to the Helminth abilities, these are what I look for with Voruna the most. Bright Bonnet also buffs ability strength, but it's more stationary than Roar, and Voruna is a very mobile frame, so it's not as effective. And also, I feel Bright Bonnet wants you to run the Arbicep to double its bonuses, and that just feels clunky with Voruna. Warcry is also a pretty decent substitute over Wrathful Advance. Wrathful Advance provides more melee damage, but Warcry provides bonus armor. Whether you care about dealing more damage or simply living longer is entirely up to you. Plus, unlike Wrathful Advance, Warcry has the Eternal War augment, which constantly extends its duration, so you don't have to worry about casting it every 15 seconds. Aqua Blades is actually a way to ensure the scaling damage bonus of Ulfrin's Descent is achieved as quickly as possible. I've tried it, and it's a pretty decent substitute for Roar. Also, bringing up the other ability that deals radial slash damage, Dark Verse, is even less viable for this specific strategy. Aqua Blades can be kept up for maybe 60 seconds at a time, but Dark Verse has to constantly be recast. Similar logic applies to Pyrotechnics, ever so slightly increasing Fangs of Rock's damage. And I've tried a run with Silence subsumed over Ulfrun's Descent, and it's a slightly worse version of Warcry. Sure, it stuns enemies, but it doesn't really provide any noticeable damage bonus or boost to her survivability. I've always seen it as an ability tailored to finisher builds, so frames like Ashe benefit from it the most, and Voruna is not one of those frames. And would you look at that, I went the whole section without mentioning Nourish once. Call the fucking militia. Now we'll move on to my personal favorite Helminth setups. I'll go through 3 different archetypes, provide my specific setups, and tell you guys how you can experiment with them. There is one extra setup, but it's tied to a companion, so I'll mention it later. The first setup is called Wrathful Wolf, and is a setup focused on buffing melee weapons. Wrathful Advance is subsumed over Ulfrun's Descent. On this build, duration is slightly more important than it normally is, since Wrathful Advance has such a short duration compared to her other Helminth options. And strength is prioritized over range to maximize Wrathful Advance's critical chance bonus. Adaptation is here because I sometimes prefer it as a survival mod, but if you want to capitalize on shield gating, you can swap it with catalyzing shields. For the reason of shield gating, you're going to be seeing Brief Respite as the R mod very often. But if you want to, Steel Charge is a good fit for this build. Equilibrium or Violet Archon Shards are going to be vital in these setups, that way you're still getting energy from Lycat's Hunt. I tried out a build with this exact same setup, only Warcry was subsumed instead of Wrathful Advance, and I put Eternal War over Prey of Dinar. And while it did provide less damage numbers, Voruna had a better time surviving, so if you want to run Warcry, just make those changes on your set. The next setup is called Ulfrun's Nuke. This is a build made specifically for nuking with Ulfrun's Descent and Fangs of Rocks, more than using her weapons. For this build, Roar is subsumed over Lycat's Hunt. Ulfrun's Endurance here is more important than Prey of Dinar, though if you want to run both, that's perfectly fine. And Precision Intensify gives a much needed damage boost to Ulfrun's Descent. There is a slight energy issue with this build since Lycat's Hunt is absent, so as a way to mitigate this, you could swap Cunning Drift with Power Drift and Precision Intensify with Archon Stretch. You'll be losing quite a bit of damage from Ulfrun's Descent, but you'll be getting more energy. Also, if you're curious, I did a run on Steel Path mod with this exact mod setup, but Aqua Blaze was subsumed over Roar, and the results were pretty nice. So if you want something more unique than the average Roar setup, then just run Aqua Blades instead. There's some actual synergy there. After that, there is a setup I call Muzzled Wolf, and this is, if you'll believe it, a Gunrunner build. For this build, Shooting Gallery is subsumed over Ulfrun's Descent. My specific version of this is a 2 augment setup because I have Prey of Dinar. But even if you decide to swap Prey of Dinar with something else, you do need to run the Muzzle Flash augment because it'll give Voruna another level of survivability. This build is objectively not as strong as her other 2 setups because her guns don't get the same bonuses as her melees from Shroud of Dinar. She's designed as a melee buffing frame, but this is a fun one to use if you don't want to run the same old melee build. Now, you've seen me use multiple different arcanes so far, and for the most part it doesn't matter which 2 specific arcanes you bring, but there are several ones that outclass others when paired with Voruna. Which leads me to her best in slot one, Arcane Impetus. This arcane provides 6% ability strength and 3% ability efficiency per unique status effect targeting enemies. Technically, the max amount of stacks the game will recognize is 15, but that includes Void and Tau status. And Fangs of Rocks can't proc those, so you'll be getting 13 stacks instead. But Voruna is one of the few frames in the game who can even have this many stacks and easily keep it up permanently. So this arcane gives you a near permanent 78% strength and 39% efficiency. Molt Augmented is another really good option, but it's just good on most frames in general. This one gives you 0.24% ability strength per kill and stacks up to 250 times. At max stacks, you'll be getting a permanent 60% ability strength. Again, it's another really good option. Arcane Ice Storm is surprisingly really good with Voruna. Once an enemy is frozen, it gives you 2% ability strength and duration for 15 seconds. And it stacks up to 20 times, so that's 40% strength and duration at max stacks. While not as much as even Molt Augmented, it is a pretty good substitute, with Voruna's specialty in inflicting status effects like Cold. Arcane Circumvent is, at the time of writing this, one of the newest arcanes that came with the old piece. When rolling through enemies, you'll steal 50% of their defenses for yourself. This can include up to 10,000 overguard, and any armor you get lasts for 15 seconds. This is a godsend when doing really high level content with Voruna like Void Cascade. Every Exilizer comes with a Thrax Centurion coated with overguard, so you won't be in short stock of overguard. Considering Voruna is built for shield gating, Arcane Aegis is another decent option. This one provides a 3% chance when damaged to recharge your shields for 12 seconds. It will be pretty redundant if you're running Catalyzing Shields and Brief Respite, but all three of them could work if you're doing a super boss like the Guilty, since them, Janus 4, etc. do a lot of nullifier shit. It's very situational though, and you're normally better off running the other options. Arcane Strike and Arcane Fury are two other melee focused arcades. Strike increases your attack speed after getting melee kills, and Fury increases your melee damage after getting kills. If you're making a hyper-specific melee loadout, then these could be viable, but more often I find myself running Arcane Impetus over them. If you do run them, just remember Allfront's Descent does not benefit from them. Instead of giving you specific setups you need for Archon Shards like 2 casting speed, 3 ability strength, I'll just tell you which bonuses from each shard benefit Voruna the most, because I'm a firm believer that Archon Shards are never a necessity in a build. Unless you're making a hyper-specific fringe build like the perfected one from earlier, if you're just making a build for casual fishers, you can throw whatever you want on your frames. For Crimson Shards, plus 25% melee critical damage, plus 10% ability strength, and plus 10% ability duration are the best. For Amber Shards, plus 25% casting speed and plus 15% parkour velocity are the best. For Azure Shards, plus 50 max energy is the best. For Emerald Shards, all of them are good. For Topaz Shards, recovering shields when killing an enemy with blast damage and plus 15% ability damage on radiated enemies are the best. For Violet Shards, all of them except for plus 30% primary electricity damage are the best. Before we talk about her best weapons, let's talk about her weapons, the Paragale and Saurfang. These are decent, the base versions anyway. I've gotten them to work with Voruna herself, but in general, I don't see myself using these weapons very often. If you really want builds for them, here they are, just your average blast and melee influence builds. I know it's boring, but there's really not much to say about them. As for other guns to pair with her, I'd say 2 specific categories of guns work the best: precision weapons and status spreaders, especially in the absence of Fangs of Rocks. Precision weapons is a bit specific, but it doesn't mean exclusively snipers. I more so mean anything that can deal headshots because of Lycat's Hunt. AoE weapons won't be very effective because you're already dealing AoE damage with her ability, so they're pretty redundant. Status spreaders will be very useful if you either subsume off Fangs of Rocks or you don't have enough energy to cast it. The best options in this field are the Cedo and Epitaph, and especially their prime variants. The Grimoire is also another really good option, less because of its priming capabilities and more so the tome mods providing bonus ability strength and other buffs. And this is pure theory crafting on my side, so I could very well be wrong. But if you're looking for a niche synergy, the Velox with its new augment from Nightwave Time Tempest could be another good source of ability strength. I mean, 60% strength is nothing to scoff at. But for melee weapons, this is going to sound really boring, but anything is good with her. She's a melee weapons buffer like Kullervo. Especially if you use Wrathful Advance, Voruna might be even better than Kullervo. There are a couple of standouts though. If you skipped over the perfected section, then I'll reiterate here. The Incarnate Nami Solo and Dual Icar are good because of their health regen evolutions. The Coda Hirudo is also good for the same reason, its innate health regen. Glaives are also really strong, but I find them to be really clunky when paired with Wrathful Advance's heavy attack, so just be warned. The Venka Prime and Keratinos are also good for Fashion Frame. Again, just run whatever melee weapon you want, just make sure it's decently modded. When it comes to the companions, there's a few Sentinels and Beasts and one Hound that outclass others when paired with Voruna. Her best Sentinel is Dirga because it's made as a status spreader. It can also make use of Duplex Bond to drop more energy orbs if you've subsumed off Lycat's Hunt and improve your energy economy. Nautilus is also just one of the goats, and especially for Voruna. She already has insane range, but grouping enemies together is always welcome. There could also be some synergy with Shade Prime. I double checked the Warframe wiki because I wasn't sure, but from what I can tell, Voruna's abilities don't break invisibility. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably redundant when paired with Shroud of Dynar, but again, the option is there, probably. As for beasts, there are really only two that stand out in my opinion. First is obviously the Panzervolk Phyla. It can spread viral status and amplify a good chunk of damage for Voruna. The second is the Adarza Kavat, specifically for a weapons platform Voruna. Its preset mods, Cat's Eye and Reflect, will increase critical chance and reflect damage respectively. And the Adarza Kavat is one of the best uses of Tenacious Bond since it has the highest base critical chance of any beast in the game. But there is one setup I neglected to mention earlier because it's tied to a specific companion, the Hound. Hounds have a precept mod called Synergized Prospectus that deals radial electric damage, and when combined with Contagious Bond, make it a status spreading machine. Now pair that with Fangs of Raksh, Prey of Dynar, and the Mecha mod set. This build kind of veers into AFK territory, so I never like to use it, but it is an incredibly strong build. Just don't bring it into public lobbies or everyone is gonna hate you. I know a lot of this video was just mindless yapping and it's not like the usual videos I upload, but I at least hope this video gave you an idea of how Voruna works as a frame. I've loved Voruna ever since her concept art was revealed back in TennoCon 2022. Even though she wasn't in the best state on launch, I loved her playstyle and still do to this day. At the end of the day, I hope this video at least taught you how to experiment with her. Okay guys, I'm not good at writing outros, just see you whenever the next upload is.